Hey, welcome to another show of the Businessology Show. This is so cool. We get to do podcasts with people who know about agency growth. That is who we bring on the show. And when we bring somebody back a second time, it means they had a lot to say. And so we had to bring them back for some additional value. And I just want to introduce Marcel Petitpas. He is the CEO and co-founder of Parakeeto, and a company. They're dedicated to agencies improving their performance, metrics, the reporting they do. I've seen it. It's crazy. And he's also the COO of Goldfront, an agency out in San Francisco that does a lot of category design work. Maybe Marcel can clarify that or share that with us. And then also Marcel is a speaker, podcaster, writer, all those things. So Marcel, pumped to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us, man.
It's always a pleasure to be around you, Jason. So thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming back for a second time. Not everybody gets invited back, but there's just so much we needed to talk about. So Marcel,
I'll try not to let that go right to my head.
Right. So there's a lot of things I love to talk about. But one of your expertise is really metrics. But then not just the metrics, but you talk a lot around the value of it, getting those metrics, why agency owners don't want it. But let's start with the value of metrics. Like, why are, summarizing data and reporting it in some way, why is that even valuable to agency owners? Why should they pursue that? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, if you've ever laid awake at night wondering, should I hire this person? Should I not hire this person? Should we take this work? Should we not take this work? Should we discount this project? Should we not discount this project? How much revenue should we be targeting next year? When are we going to need to hire our next designer? All of those kinds of questions, like, were our jobs profitable or not? How much money did we actually make on this website project that feels like it went good, or it feels like it went terrible, but I actually don't know. These are things that add undue stress and undue uncertainty to what is already a very stressful, very uncertain situation, which is running an agency. And so there's a ton of value to me in having that data there to just allow us to have a little bit more sanity and a little bit more objectivity about making decisions in the business. And of course, as the business scales and there's more leadership, more people that need to be involved and on the same page, it can really help with making sure that there's cohesiveness across many different layers of people that need to get held accountable for performance.
Yeah, very cool. So in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of feeling related to what these owners go through, right? They're like, they're feeling their way through pricing, leading teams. And so metrics are they're going to justify or bring some kind of credibility maybe to a feeling, or prove that the feeling was wrong. I guess a metric is the truth that's coming in and helping, basically.
That's the goal. That's the goal. And, we see this surface in all kinds of different situations, right? So a couple of really common ones that we see data being really valuable in supporting. Number one is selling work, right? So there's a conversation we hear a lot about, like, well, we needed the revenue, so we discounted it, and it turned out to be a dumpster fire and we lost money on it, but we really needed to close it. And it's like, well, did you actually? Because let's talk through that situation. Like, when should you discount work? Well, you need to be looking at utilization, and you need to be looking at your capacity forecast. Because if your utilization is going to really dip and you really need to close that project to keep it from dropping below critical level, then you probably should discount that. But if that's not going to happen, then it might actually be better for you to turn that work away. But without the data there to help you actually make a sound decision and think all the way through that can be tough. And then similar with retrospective meetings, I've found that without clear data about here's what actually happened on the project, you can spend the whole retrospective arguing with the team about what everyone thought happened on the project, as opposed to getting to what's important, which is why did this happen and what can we learn from it?
Yeah. So utilization and capacity forecast, agency owners don't have that stuff. That is rare that they have that reporting. Why is that? Why don't they have that reporting in the first place? And I know that's why you exist, but why can't they get it on their own, I guess?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And if you've ever tried to build out this system and found that it was like, you felt like you were trying to build it on quicksand, it's because the assumptions that were underlying that were probably just not very good. And so what that ultimately comes back to, and this is like the least sexy answer that I can give to this question, but it's the truth, is it comes down to your ability to scope client work and to do that in a way that is accurate and to do it in a structure that aligns to the rest of your operating model as an agency. And that gets overlooked. People skip right ahead to let's figure out how to resource plan and forecast our pipeline and, do a hiring plan. But all of that relies on our ability to take assumptions about client work and project them into the future. So if our system for coming up with assumptions and scope and client work aren't solid, we don't have a foundation for agency operations. We don't have a foundation for any kind of forward-looking projections.
Oh, okay. So, all right, the foundation to scope properly for an agency, like I thought that was just, they're like, hey, here's the project we want to do with you. Are you talking about they got to key in some data or something to be able to scope on the front end of working with an agent or working with one of their clients or?
So of course that's the dream, right? And we've done hundreds of customer interviews where we've asked clients about their challenges. And one of the things we hear constantly is we know we should be using more data about past projects to help us be better at estimating future projects. So of course, if we can create that feedback loop, that's super helpful. There is always going to be some subjectivity, some conversation with the client, but we should have a way of having a baseline and then really being clear about what are the 2, 3, 4 questions that we have to ask the client about their website or about their brand or about their content strategy. They're going to help us quantify how much additional complexity there is relative to kind of the baseline estimate that we have for this kind of work. And with those kinds of models, we can use data to very quickly get to 80% fidelity on an estimate and really accelerate the speed at which we estimate, as well as increase the accuracy without creating any additional work for the team.
Okay. So what you're talking about is the data that a team is producing on all past work can be accumulated in a way properly that helps you scope future work. But you're saying that past data, agencies don't have it, don't keep it, don't analyze it, right? That's the structure you're talking about.
Yeah, so this is a big idea. You're guiding us in a great direction,
That's
Jason.
big.
So that should be the goal, right? My view on this is every day the agency is producing data that should make it smarter, should make it easier for you to make sound assumptions about client work. The problem is it's often not being captured. If it is being captured, it's not being captured in a format that is easy to reconcile against the assumptions that were made about client work. So the simple example of this is you hold up an estimate and it says this many dev hours, this many project management hours, this many design hours. Then you go into the time tracking tool and it's 200 random tasks that don't have any association back to the estimate.
I see.
So it's just really hard to answer that question now because I've got to clean up all of this data to answer a very simple question. So it starts with asking the question of what are the things that we need to know about our business so that we can have more confidence, make better decisions. Now let's go look at our data systems, how we track time, how we structure our estimate, and just make sure that those things line up, that they're actually working towards supporting answering those important questions. It's a simple idea, but of course it's much more nuanced and much more complicated when you get into the weeds of it. Oh yeah, no, that's tough. Any of our agency clients, the data, even around accounting and financial pieces, the data is difficult, to maintain. The operational data, I would imagine, is even more nuanced and more difficult. And a lot of agencies are looking for that magical product, right? That's been built, that's been created. It might be a project management system coupled with a time tracking system, something magical that's going to really pump out all the data. But isn't it always human entry and output is what's really going to define how that nuanced data can be read well? Is that true? Yeah, this is our POV on what's wrong with this space right now, is that most agencies are caught in one of two situations, neither one of which we see as being a great solution. So the first, as most people listening are probably in this situation, we call this best of breed tool stack. So you've got a project management tool. It just does project management, but it's really good at it. Your team probably loves it. It's a ClickUp, an Asana, a Monday.com, really solid. You might have a time tracking tool. All they do is track time. They're really good at it. It's a harvest, it's a toggle, it's a click time, whatever. But the problem with that, of course, as you know, is now your data is in a whole bunch of different places. If we want to answer the simple question of how much revenue could we recognize on this project so far this month, and what is our projected average billable rate? Well, I need to take a lot of data, get it into a spreadsheet, wrangle it. It's manual. It takes a long time. Therefore, it doesn't really happen because you've got 10 other client fires that are much more important right now. So the dream that's being sold to everyone, to your point, is, well, What if you traded in all those really, really good tools for one really big, super mediocre tool that does all this stuff in one place? But hey, at least all your data will be in one spot. So these data reporting problems will go away. And what we found working with clients that are on these platforms and even helping some clients transition to those platforms, every single one of them still ended up in spreadsheets for some or all of their reporting.
Yeah.
Why is that? Right? Well, usually to your point, it was because they still didn't do a great job of the compliance, the data entry. They weren't deliberate enough about how they were using objects in that tool, naming conventions, keeping things consistently structured. Sometimes there are some architectural opinions in the products that just don't jive with the business model. So I'll give you an example. Function Point, recently worked with a client on Function Point. Their whole architecture for that software kind of assumes that everything is time and materials. So if you want to do modeling on flat rates or value-based pricing, it gets challenging, and there's reports that you just can't pull inside of their software. You have to do it outside of the software. So those kinds of limitations are tough, and then you might outgrow part of it. Or maybe you've got one part of your process for project management or tracking time or estimating projects that is so ingrained in something else that it has to live outside. And so that undermines and negates all the value. So those are kind of the two camps that most people are in. And I hope, Jason, that somebody builds the ultimate agency management platform, but I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, no, we haven't either. Every client we work with, they're on spreadsheets, so we always ask them, all right, show us your spreadsheets. And a lot of them are necessary, right, for them to actually make decisions and move forward. And sometimes we can bring, some kind of robust financial reporting tool that can kind of pull some of that in, but they're always projecting on a spreadsheet, and it's always a financial number. And it's really hard to pull, it's sometimes just so much easier to just hand key stuff into maybe a spreadsheet because the CEO can at least go that makes sense, but somebody's manually updating it. And it's just, it's tough to pull any kind of metrics out of that. So when y'all do your work, what do you do? An audit of their spreadsheets, their financial products, their operational product? How do you pull all that together to then start? Because you guys push out operational reporting that gathers all that together.
Yeah, it's I'll start with the highest level of service that we offer, which is we describe it as like a fractional operations team for your agency. Okay. So you don't have to worry about any of this stuff anymore. You just get crystal clear, super accurate, quality assured reports on whatever cadence you've paid for, and all the stuff around Tina left her time tracker running for 99 hours last week, and Jason set up the project and harvest the wrong way with the wrong naming conventions and the wrong structure. Like, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We'll take care of it. And your project manager doesn't have to spend half their time sorting that stuff out either. And so how do we get there? Well, it starts with, to your point, an audit. And that's kind of the first engagement we do with every client. We go in, get under the hood, see how all their systems are working, and we help them understand exactly where they're losing profits, how much of that is related to earning efficiency and over-servicing clients, how much of it is related to utilization, how much of it is related to fiscal management, overhead spending, that kind of stuff. Then we get into our implementation phase where we go through the business model, make sure that that's sound. Like, what problem are you solving? What services do you sell? How do you price those? What's your contract language look like? Is all that making sense? We go into estimation, right? How do you create assumptions about your projects? How are those structured? What questions do you ask? How do you figure out complexity? Those kind of things. And then once we have that data model, then we go and look at tooling. We say, okay, now that we know the format the data needs to be in, the questions that need to be answered to support the business model, is the tooling able to get us everything that we need? Do we need to make modifications to how it's set up? Naming convention, structure, use of objects, etc. Do we need to add tools, change tools, modify tools? And then we install our transformation layer. So our approach to solving this problem, right, which is not best of breed, not all in one, but it's whatever you want on the tooling side, we'll set up a system outside of those tools that understands what is the format all the data needs to end up in. We'll pull the data in from those sources and normalize it all horizontally and vertically. So let's just say, for example, those of you listening will probably have had this experience. Maybe you've changed the way that you set up a project in your project management or your time tracking tool a few times over the last few years, right? You hire a new PM, or you have a strategic offsite, you change the way you're packaging this product, and you go, hey, there's a better way. Let's use tasks for this instead of this now. Well, the problem with that is now you can't compare a project from a year ago to a project today because the data looks so different. It needs a lot of cleanup.
Okay.
So we can write rules inside of our transformation layer that normalizes all that data. So all your historical data becomes easier to benchmark against, one project to another. And then we also go vertical. So Harvest versus ClickUp versus QuickBooks versus your resource planning tool, whatever that might be. We can start normalizing data. And ultimately what that gives us is a set of data that is historically and structurally sound, that we can actually build reports on top of, that make sense, that can look across broad time horizons. And it gives us the flexibility to say, okay, your team has outgrown Harvest. You need to go to something else.
Yeah.
No problem. We can swap that out. You won't lose any of your historical data. You won't break the reporting downstream.
Nice.
We can facilitate that transition and keep everything humming. And our approach kind of assumes that there's going to be change, as opposed to the other ways of doing things. It kind of assumes that there won't be change, because change means you're churning off of their product, which isn't good for their business model as a software company.
Right.
Therefore, they want to make that as hard and as painful as possible for you. Our approach is the opposite. Let's make sure that it's okay for you to change, because that's what's going to happen naturally in the business. And let's make sure that that doesn't undermine the integrity of your entire reporting system when it happens.
Man, so you guys are you guys are consultants. Is that the category you'd put yourself in? Because that's a lot of work you're talking about, and then reporting on it and building it. So it sounds like a consulting.
I would consider us to be a technology leveraged service company. Yes.
Okay.
So similar to, if anyone's familiar with Price Intelligently in the software space, where they do pricing optimization for software, they do a service, but they have a lot of technology that helps them do it in a way that doesn't cost their clients $500,000. Similarly, we're using technology to offer a service that otherwise would only be available to huge agencies that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on enterprise software and a lot of money to get it set up. So we're able to bring that down market, because we found ways to make it efficient using technology that we use internally to deliver the service.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's still bulky. It's a lot of nuanced work that consultants would do. You're just leveraging technology to get the reporting quicker and for less investment.
The upfront is a big lift. Yeah, we do spend quite a bit of time digging through things, doing strategy, sitting down with calls. We do a lot of the heavy lifting that can be overwhelming to most people that are currently tasked with this in a smaller agency. And when I say smaller, I mean, 10 to 50, maybe 100 employees on the high end. Usually this is falling either onto a founder who didn't start an agency to deal with numbers, or a project manager who's got a full client load and is being asked to do this off the side of their desk. And frankly, they are way in over their head and don't really know how to do it well.
Yeah. Well, it's complex. I think even the agency owner, right? One question I wanted to ask you is, do agency owners even understand, when you built the report, do they even understand the metrics, right? Because it has a lot of science to it. It's like this is a number, but it means this is how you should change how you operate. And so is it even understandable when you're done, or is there is a lift for you to educate an owner or a PM, I guess, right?
Yeah, of course. And there is a process by which we sit down and are looking at the numbers together. And over time, the client learns, what these things mean and how to react to them. But there is a cadence that is baked into our service, where a consultant will sit down, look at the reports with you, have a strategic discussion, not unlike what you do on the financial side, and how your team operates. Because I think that is important, right? This stuff is nuanced, it's difficult, and not just upfront in determining, like, let's take a simple, air quotes, a simple metric like utilization. What does utilization mean? Well, it's actually a very complex discussion. What is capacity? What's included in that? Are we including vacation time or not? Is it billable or is it not billable? And then within that, we also have the billable hour question. What is a billable hour? Is it time that's productive? Is it time that's spent on the client work? Is it time that's billed through to the client? Is it some nebulous combination of those things? Right? These things need to get sorted out and agreed upon. And then there has to be a discussion about, okay, well, now that we understand what we're looking at, we have to now also discuss, well, what do we do about it? Why is our utilization at 43% when it should be at 55%?
Yeah, it's hard. And what's funny is, as consultants, we go in and clients will say, oh, yeah, we value price. And then you find about, 34% of the projects are time and materials. You're like, wait. And so your inputs now are, well, we don't track time on that one. We do track time on these. And it's like, well, I thought y'all were like flat fee. So what is the data? And sometimes they're not lying, but they may not be truthful because they're saying we approach work from a value price perspective, when the data is actually, they have some team, maybe the dev team, still keying in time or something. And do you find that like what they tell you on the front end is not exactly what you find in the guts of the systems?
Yeah, of course. We see that all the time. And I don't think any of it, to your point, is malicious. It's, that this stuff is confusing and it's hard to figure out what you do and don't need to do. And even some of these terms, right? Like there isn't some governing body that's telling agencies, this is what value-based pricing means. Like, what's a retainer, Jason?
Yeah.
How many different answers to that question have you gotten in the last decade?
For sure.
Right. So there isn't a definition for this stuff. So I think, to your point, we see a lot of things where we hear one thing, we get into the audit, we discover that it's a different thing altogether. And I think it just comes from a lack of clarity in the industry about how to do these things, what these things mean, and how to think through them.
Yeah. Well, and that's the purpose of an audit, right? An audit is to churn through it, make sense of it, right? And then teach it. And so that's the value of what you do is people may go, why would I need an audit? You need somebody to dig through your mess and explain it and put it in order, right? Because we don't know. The agency owner doesn't know. And so I guess that's what you do in an audit is kind of, there's some kickoff to explain it or something like that, right?
Yeah, the output from the audit really is, here's how much money you've left on the table in the last 12 months, and here's what that's going to cost you in the next 12 months if you don't address it. And we break that down into literally like $452,000.893 average billable rate problem. Your average billable rate was $113.62, and your target is $150. So where's that gap coming from? Let's talk about why, right? So it's always current state, opportunity, strategic recommendations. And we kind of go through the core three areas, which is earning efficiency, utilization, and then fiscal management of the business. And then we kind of go into, so here's the opportunity for you. If you fix these things, this is what could be true for you over the next 12 months. Here's how that could affect your profits, your valuation. Here's the things that we believe need to change in order for you to close that gap. And here's ways that we can support you. And we always kind of have three options, right? Here's how you can do it yourself. Here's some other people we know of that are smart that you can go reach out to and work with if we're not the right fit. Here's some free tools that we've developed for you. There's a done with you. And then there's a, full service, high level of engagement option. So that's kind of how we go through the audit process. It's a high value deliverable. And a lot of clients, they're just blown away with what we're able to produce in a very short period of time for what I think is an extremely affordable rate as well. Yeah,
very sure. I like that you gave those three components that you use. Now, but to the core of the metrics, if you're talking to any agency, like are there like 2 or 3 metrics they need to be looking at? Like what are those really basic ones? Everybody needs to look at these things. What are those?
Yeah, to me, there's really kind of only 2. I'll break it out actually into kind of 2 sections. There's the day-to-day ones, and then there's your financial statements. So let's talk about day-to-day metrics for a second. There's really just 2 things that are critically important. The first is some measure of earning efficiency. So we're asking the question, how efficiently does the business earn revenue? Which essentially means when our team goes to work for clients, how much cash flow is that generating for the business? And we're basically looking there at one of 2 ways of measuring that. The first is by looking at, I'm going to call it delivery margin. We call it delivery margin. This might be called for some people contribution margin, gross margin, but I've almost never seen this properly reflected on a P&L statement for an agency because most agencies use a generalized accounting firm. They're not using somebody like yourself, Jason,
That's right.
who really does understand this and structure things well. So gross margin is, of course, a difficult way to measure on a tight time horizon or on a specific subsection of the business like a client or a project, because you need to understand exactly all the revenue that's come from that client and you need to know all the costs associated to that client. So it actually is very taxing and very challenging to do like project or client-based accounting, especially if you're small, you might not have the resources
Very
for it. So
difficult.
the better way of doing that, in my opinion, the easy way is using average billable rate. And the simple formula for average billable rate is, what is the agency gross income for this project? I'll explain agency gross income for a moment, but you can just think of that in terms of what is the income for that project,
right,
divided by the number of hours that had to be worked in order to complete the deliverables. And in this case, we're defining those billable hours as any time that was spent on that client, regardless of if it impacts how much they get billed or not.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if we charge them extra or we charge them less. If you had to spend time to get the deliverable done, that counts towards
those raw hour input. Okay.
That's right. So average billable rate I like as a metric for earning efficiency, because you can use it to look at a client, you can use it to look at a project, you can use it to look at a week, a month, a quarter, an entire year. You can slice and dice the agency across any time horizon, across any level of depth with that metric, and start comparing things apples to apples. So you can say, hey, we do 165 on websites, we do 122 on SEO, and we do 190 on video projects.
Yeah.
That's an insight, right? Like we're more efficient at earning revenue in this service. And then similarly, if you can understand roughly what your cost per hour is for your team, now you have a very kind of back of the napkin, directionally accurate way to measure your delivery margin or your gross margin as well. You can kind of get in the ballpark. Oh yeah, okay, we're about 60, 70%. Cool. Okay. Cool, we're good. So that's the first metric is, are we earning revenue efficiently? Are we fundamentally profitable enough on the work that we're doing every day across these clients, across this time horizon, whatever that is? That's metric number one.
Okay. Can I say that back to you? Can I say that back to you, Marcel?
Yeah, that was a lot.
That's a lot. Okay. So it's you're tracking firm efficiency or firm revenue creation efficiency, basically. What did you call it? The
earning efficiency.
That's right. Okay. So earning efficiency. I'm going to be your student here. Earning efficiency. So you're basically taking some measure of income. That could be for the agency, could be for a project, could be for a client, could be for a week, whatever. There's some dollar amount. You're dividing it by all the hours, the raw hours from a system that were needed to produce that revenue. Now, it doesn't matter if you build those hours or not, wrote it up, wrote it down, whatever. That's going to be your ABR, your average billable rate. Now you're saying, I've got something I can compare to the financial cost of my team. And I can watch that variable go up and down depending on the period of time I'm tracking. And I have insights. And now I can go, we suck, or we're doing pretty good. And that alone guides us into what we can go fix. So what part of that should I correct, or would you correct? Earnings
Jason,
efficiency.
You said that better than I did.
Okay.
So thank you.
I love it.
The eloquent paraphrasing.
Okay. So earnings efficiency, that's really, so I know we're getting really practical here, but this is really good stuff. People can go do this back of the napkin. So, all right. Now, what are some other metrics you add into this core earnings efficiency?
Right. So earning efficiency is the first one we just talked about. The second one that you have to look at, and you have to look at both of these side by side, is utilization. So utilization is the measurement of what is the capacity that we have for client work and how much of our available capacity is being deployed towards earning us revenue, right? So how many of those hours that we have available every day, every week, every month are being used to go and get us that, whatever that average billable rate is, that $150, $180 an hour, whatever that is.
Nice.
And the way that we measure that is we're looking, and the way that I like to measure this, so this is a very hotly debated metric. What's the right way to do this, Jason? Our POV on how to do this is, let's keep it simple and let's just look at billable hours and total capacity. So let's break those things down. We talk about capacity. We're just going to say, like, Jason, if I hired you, you're a full-time employee, you work 40 hours a week, there's 52 weeks in a year, your capacity is 2,080 hours. I am not going to take out your vacation time, your sick time, your holidays. I'm not going to take out the company foosball tournament. I'm going to take all of that uncertainty and all of that inefficiency, and I'm just going to bake it into the target for the company. Because, and the reason we want to do that is because it's the same reason that net profit on a project or a client is a flawed idea, because all of the inputs that go into overhead, just like all the inputs that go into like that inefficiency that's hard to measure for an employee, is going to change from week to week. I might give you an extra 5 vacation days because you've been with us for 10 years.
Yeah.
You have to go on mat leave. Like
Right.
you can't actually
You can't
effectively
track
compare.
that.
And it just, it's hard. It just adds so much complexity and friction to tracking utilization. So let's keep it simple. And let's just say, okay, 2,080 hours for a full-time employee. And then how much time, again, was spent working for clients. The billable hour definition in this case is, was it spent on clients? Doesn't matter if it affected how much they paid us or not.
Okay.
How much time was spent working for clients? That is our utilization rate. And the reason we want to look at those two things together is because we can exchange one metric for the other. So we'll give you a scenario, right? Our utilization rate is going up, because we've been telling the team, hey, you got to get utilization up. You got to get utilization up. But our average billable rate is going down. What's happening there, Jason? We're just spending more time earning the same amount of revenue. That's not benefiting us. In fact, that's probably working against us, because now clients have an unrealistic idea of how much time and service they should be getting for what they're paying us. Conversely, we might be increasing our average billable rate, meaning we're spending less time to earn the same revenue. That is a better situation. But what that also means is we're getting more efficient. Therefore, we want to start to try and capitalize on that additional time that we have available so that we can actually realize the benefit of being more efficient. So that's why we always kind of want to be looking at those two metrics side by side, because if we just look at one of them, then we might be missing the fact that we're actually just kind of pawning efficiency from one off onto the other.
Yeah, no, I love that, because one is truly a capacity, time-based, person-directed tracking metric, the utilization, and one is a financial one where we're interpreting some of that person's work into the efficiency of our revenue, and put together we can really start to know a lot about our team, because both of them are about your team, like how efficient they are in producing your revenue and how they're utilizing the hours that they're at work. And a lot of that, how much of the team doing this well is led by the owner, the project manager. Like a good project manager could come in and pull more efficiency out of maybe even a mediocre team, I would imagine. So when do you know to go, well, it's our project manager that doesn't know how to lead this creative team? When does a leadership issue become part of it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So my POV on this is that, especially in the early days, neither one of these are metrics that your team should be held accountable to, because ultimately it's not really their responsibility. Right?
Interesting.
Especially utilization. The biggest mistake I see agency owners make is they go to their team and they say, I need you at 65%. Because Jason, if I tell you, I need you to be at 65% this week, but you don't have enough work to do, what are you going to do? Yeah. You're just going to make the logo bigger and smaller for 4 hours in Figma until you hit your 65%. And now we don't have a truthful representation in our time tracking tool of how long it takes you to do that logo.
That's interesting.
So what's actually important about utilization is that that's not a measurement of how hard your team is working. That's a measurement of how good you are at running the business, how good you are at planning work, how good you are at managing your resources. That should be used to hold the project management and the leadership team accountable to their ability to run the business well, not the team. In a flat rate world, especially, the team has nothing to do with utilization. You just need to give them enough work to do so that they actually have a chance of hitting it. And then you need to encourage them to be as honest and transparent as possible about how long it actually took them to do things. The one that you could expose to them earlier is average billable rate.
Okay.
But I would only really be exposing that in the context of like a retroactive, where we're saying, hey, this project, we expected to make $150 an hour, but we actually made $180. What happened? What did we do here that was so much better than what we expected? Did we overscope this? Did you do something different? Oh, okay, interesting. You had a different way of handing off the design to the developers and it was more efficient. It was really smooth. That's really interesting. Could we do that on the next project? Could we replicate that idea? Yeah. Jason, that's a really great idea. Would you be comfortable taking the lead, documenting that as a process and training the team on it? Like, that's the context that we want to be exposing average billable rate is. And similarly, this project did not go the way we planned. What can we learn from this? Like, why did it happen? That's the feedback loop. But I can't stress enough, utilization, there's just no point in giving that metric to your team and trying to hold them accountable to it, because it doesn't create good incentives. It doesn't drive productive behavior.
That is a trip. That's a trip. I've never heard that. So metric generation becomes an insight driver for the owners. I've always heard utilization applied to the team, and the team held accountable for something that actually can really frustrate them and produce a lot of resentment when they're like, you guys are idiots. You actually know I only do the work you give me. So you're telling me to utilize my time in different ways. I have no work for my 40-hour week next week. Fix that.
Right.
And they have so you're saying metrics are best generated for the owners of the agency and for them to speak with more wisdom maybe to their team. So the team needs to be led, whereas the metrics are being fed to the owners to help them lead better.
For the most part, yeah. And I think that's especially true about utilization. The project management level and up, I think, is where utilization is useful because, again, it's a feedback loop on how good of a job are we doing of setting our team up to drive success. Are we giving them enough work? Are we doing a good job of planning stuff? Are we doing a good job of scoping work? Are we doing a good job of pricing work? Like average billable rate, it's easy for you to go and say, hey, we budgeted 200 hours for this. The team spent 400 and our average billable rate was half as good as this. Easy for you to sit there and go, oh, well, the team just blew the budget out of the water.
Right.
But like the inverse side of that is like, well, maybe you just scoped that really, really badly.
That's right.
Very possible. There's probably some tension between those two realities that needs to get reconciled, but that's where discussion needs to happen. The data is not going to give us the answer to why it happened. It's just going to tell us where we need to have a discussion and try to find some mutual understanding.
Very cool. All right. So we're almost out of time now. I didn't know we were out of time. It's like we haven't even calculated Jason. All the metrics, man. This is good stuff. So
I'll point people to some resources for that stuff if they want to go deeper.
Yeah. So that's probably the best place to turn. Where can they go to find, and this is kind of some deep stuff. I mean, I'm hearing some new stuff, which is metrics are not applied to team, which is not something I've really heard before. So where can they go learn some deeper things about this?
Yeah, so I think the best next step for anyone that's listening, that's kind of having some light bulbs go off in their head, is we have put together the Agency Profitability Toolkit. And what that is it's essentially a course. We've got a Google Drive folder, and inside of it, we've got templates, checklists, cheat sheets, PDF, guides, workbooks that you can fill out, kind of go through all the key elements of agency profitability. And I've got videos recorded in each of those modules to walk you through exactly how to do everything. And that really comes from my belief that every agency should have the ability to do this at a basic level without hiring me or anybody else. So if you want to check that out, parakeeto.com/toolkit. And that'll be kind of the great next step if you want to go deeper on some of this stuff. And of course, we've written at length about this on our blog. So if you want to go see all the calculations, the metrics, the examples on some of these metrics that we've talked about, you can find some great in-depth content there on our blog about it.
I love it, man. This is so good, Marcel. Every time you come, the last time I got excited. Now I'm learning new stuff this time. So thank you for being with us on the Businessology Show. I've got like 10 more questions we didn't get to. So, but I think we hit some key
maybe we do
ones,
a part
man.
3, Jason.
Yeah,
maybe we
that's
do a
right.
part 3. I'm open to it.
I think we're going to have to do a part 3 because this is really big. So, well, cool. So it's parakeeto.com. So can you spell that?
Yeah, parakeeto.com/toolkit. And if there's show notes or something somewhere, maybe we can leave a link there for you so it's easy. Yeah. And if you want to have a part 3 of Marcel Petitpas, then leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. Send Jason an email, send him direct mail, send him whatever communications, fax, messenger, pigeon, whatever you got.
Do it.
Let them know what the people want, and
Very
hopefully
cool.
they'll be back.
Okay, that sounds great. So Marcel, thanks for joining us on the Businessology Show. I always enjoy talking to you, and thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate you.
Likewise, Jason. Thank you.
All right, take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.